One lifter, 3 questions. The segment where you ask one lifter 3 questions. Let's go. What's up, guys? It's Johnny Candido of Candido Training HQ. Today's video, I'm going to answer your questions right now. Let's go. Do you think getting injured at some point is inevitable if your goal is to reach your maximum strength level? Yes. I'm going to say yes. Now, this is something where different people have different answers to this, especially different coaches and how they interpret evidence and all that. But there's really 3 layers here of reasoning. So first of all, let's just go with the easiest, the shallowest, is the examples. So I myself obviously recently had a hamstring injury. Before that, I had back injury issues. But then let's go through elite lifters just one by one. Ray Williams recently had a piriformis issue, which caused him to have to slow down his squat. Vlad, who has the heaviest squat in history, has a complete knee replacement. Taylor Atwood, the 74 kilogram best lifter ever, had a groin injury, which significantly derailed his squat progress about a year ago. Even Russell here on YouTube, he had an issue with his back in 2018, which caused him to deadlift like 50 pounds less than normal. Sean Noriega had a torn meniscus. Brett Gibbs also had some quad snap city during one of his squats and now needs surgery on his elbow. Then you could also look at Ashton Ruska even, who has the highest coefficient, and he's only 23 or 24 years old. He actually had a history of back issues as a teenager from lifting. And then also even guys like Bryce Lewis had back injury issues at some point. And then finally, I'd say the only one I don't know for sure is probably Dennis Cornelius of National Champions. So basically every single national champion has had a significant injury. So you could look at that and just say, well, the Hodge twins are right, that powerlifting does snap you up. However, there's a total opposite argument to this, but then I actually think there's a middle ground where it is very blurry. I don't think it's just, well, science debunks that, and then that's it. No, there's 2 sides to this. So let's get to the second tier. So this is just the empirical evidence. So injury rate per 1,000 hours in powerlifting is around 1.1 or 0.3 injuries per year to a given lifter. That is lower than strongman, lower than most sports, but a little bit higher than bodybuilding. In fact, there's actually a study where they compared powerlifting to badminton, and powerlifting was significantly safer than badminton. So that's kind of the answer that a lot of people give to debunk it, but it still isn't really telling the whole story. Because Greg Nuckols at Stronger by Science, he hosted a great article that I think bridged the gap probably better than anything I've read. Because he surveyed 1,900 lifters and found that 63.9% of them did have an acute injury. Also, on top of this, he mentioned a phenomenal point. This is probably the best one, is that he referenced some other studies where actually people going into a competition had over 40% of them had some sort of injury that they were dealing with. Also, another study had 70% of lifters dealing with some sort of issue. So the main point here is that you can't just look at injuries per hour, because if LeBron James breaks his nose playing basketball, he might have to sit out that game and then come in with a mask on. And that counts as an injury. The same thing as powerlifting, hurting your knee does. However, that nose injury is going to have 0 carryover long term. He'll just wear the mask on, it'll be a little bit annoying, and then he'll be fine and he's moving on. So that is a significantly different situation, and that is why I think it can be misleading to only reference injury rate per 1,000 hours. There is no real adjustment that you can make to completely de-emphasize a joint in a more limited sport like powerlifting. On top of this, I also think there's something to be said for the fact that you can compete very well in powerlifting while being completely snapped up. And even in strength sports in general. There was actually a lifter from North Korea who could barely walk correctly, limping onto the platform, and was able to make her lifts. Now, a lot of people use that as a source of inspiration, but she's probably going to be sent to an internment camp if she doesn't hit that lift. In a sport like track and field, if you can't walk properly, you're not fast. That's it. You could try running through it and you would do significantly worse. So that is a relevant factor as far as being able to control your own decisions and making sure that you don't do something stupid. In powerlifting, you can get dumber and dumber and dumber and just run yourself into the ground. Finally, something that was noted in Greg Nuckols' survey is that the stronger lifters did tend to get hurt at a higher rate, irrespective of how much they trained. And actually, frequency and volume wasn't even correlated to injury, which was a surprise to me. I think this has implications as far as a potential disconnect from previous studies in the 90s and 2000s to where we may end up seeing the sport. Since people are way stronger, the the gene pool is just expanded to where now lifters back then would be nothing. A lot of those single ply guys, not all of them, but a lot of them would be irrelevant. That's just how the game goes. So it could be possible that those studies don't actually apply to these junior new age champions who now will develop even further in their 30s to levels that we have no idea where that goes. Now, however, I've been painting this grim picture this whole time, but overall it's not bad. And the reason why it's not bad is because the question isn't if you get hurt. The question is, how do you handle it? And how long is your timeline? As long as your timeline is long enough, you'll be fine. You'll almost certainly not need surgery. You'll almost certainly recover within a month or so. And if you don't, you still have enough time. So this comes back to what I mentioned in my comeback video where I tongue-in-cheek said, if I give this 2+ years, then what's my odds?
Well, this is very simple. You submit the amount of time you're willing to train with no PR, and I will scale the odds to that timetable. Odds that you will hit a new PR again. Okay.
The real main point here is that every single one of those lifters has gotten over it. All of them. Yeah, I'd say I had to recheck that. Except, well, Brett Gibbs with the elbow surgery, we'll see. But I mean, I'm sure he'll be fine. With the quad injury, he did get over that. Sean Noriega's fine. Russell's fine. All of that. So the main point here is that you want to expand your timeline and make yourself anti-fragile. It's not about avoiding all injuries. It's a matter of, if your timeline's long enough, will that injury even be a significant blip on any 6-month time span? No, it doesn't have to be for almost every injury in powerlifting. Obviously, someone's going to say, well, this injury, that injury. There are exceptions, but they're very rare. And I'm confident if I had my back injury again, I would get over it within 6 months. I guarantee it. I would probably get over it within a month and a half. It would go from 2 years to a month and a half. I guarantee that, which is almost invalidating of my injury, but I don't care. Like, I don't have emotional attachment to like my burden. I just want to get the best results, and I know I can now. In a lot of ways, it's like investing in an index fund where if you freak out and pull out, well, then now you might lose money. If you invest in an index fund for a 20-year span, does anybody lose money in modern times? No, they don't. So you're almost guaranteed success. All right, now let's look at the second question. Okay, question number 2. It's by our boy, Sean Noriega. He says, which powerlifter would win each event in the NFL Combine? Now, I'm only going to answer the 40-yard dash because I want to get surgical with this answer. Just break everything down here. So the 2 fastest powerlifters of all time are Kevin Oak and Tom Martin. Kevin Oak ran a 10.58 100-meter dash for Villanova. Tom Martin actually ran a 10.53 100-meter dash. And also his 60-meter dash was 0.09 faster than Kevin Oak's. So both of those guys are absolutely insane. I don't know if people realize just how elite a fully auto 10.5 100-meter dash is. So if you run hand time in high school, that would basically be, technically the conversion's 0.24, but that would most likely be 10.1 to 10.2, especially since you get to just pick whichever deviation throughout the year is most favorable to you. So almost certainly I would say you'd get timed at 10.1 at some point. It is just ridiculous. And that's honestly pretty close to being able to pursue being a pro sprinter, depending on the country. Because a lot of countries, their relay teams have some 10.2 to 10.4 runners. Not every country's like the US and Jamaica. So anyways, with that being said, there is an issue that both of them have gotten larger, have taken their vitamins, and what has happened since then is Kevin Oak has torn a lat and torn a quad within a month of each other. And then Tom Martin has torn a tricep while squatting at some point in a meet, which is pretty unusual. So obviously I've had my fair share of injuries, so I'm not trying to hate or anything, but I do think if they sprinted, they might spontaneously combust. So I'll do is put my top 5. I have Kevin Oak at 5, Tom Martin at 4. Now, this is where things get a little bit off script here. I will put Derek Akun at number 3, and he is the one non-track guy that I'll put in this spot. He actually ran a 4.4, word on the street is, at least. These are more unofficial sources on this one. And he ran a 4.5 going into the NFL. But he actually had a real profile for the Dallas Cowboys. So that will get some leniency as far as, I don't like 40-yard dashes because they are unbelievably lied about to just a level that you can't even imagine. You can't even reason with people who say they ran a 4.3 and they're just some random guy in their backyard. Like, it really is ridiculous. So that will be the one exception where, that's as legit as it can get. And even then, by the way, NFL 40-yard dashes are done horribly. Because even half auto, the part that's hand time is the SART, which is the dumbest thing since that's the most affected by reaction time. But anyways, so let's get to the top 2. Now, believe it or not, I was actually thinking Matt Does Fitness might be the fastest because he had a triple jump history where he triple jumped 50 feet. Basically, he's 15.15 meters. Very elite. And he also did a powerlifting meet before his channel kind of blew up to this insane level that he's at now. So that combination could be pretty crazy. And also the fact that he did not get huge and he's still natural, in my opinion. I know many people disagree. I have seen, there are many videos of people begging to differ. But what let me down, what disappointed me, was he did a 100-meter dash and he ran 12.9 in it this year. And that is, you can't put him in the top 5 then. You can't be running at 12.9. Like a 13-second 100-meter dash, like, come on, dog.
12.99.
That's literally embarrassing.
So,
I could run that when I was like 13 years old.
Not good enough. I can't put that 100-meter dash. That's too disgusting. So anyways, let's go to the top 2 now. So number 2, fastest powerlifters in the world, Eric Carlson. I'll give him this because he ran a 10.77 and he still looks to be in about the regular shape. He didn't get huge. He's still a drug-tested lifter. So I think he would probably be able to retain that speed moderately well. Now, drum roll, please. The fastest powerlifter on the planet, Candido Training HQ certified, is Ashley Watson. Now, this is a great British lifter who he ran a 10.8. It was slightly wind assisted 100-meter dash in 2017. And he also, this is the most relevant part probably, is he ran a 60-meter dash in 2018 and he ran a 7.09. Which, if you compare that to Kevin Oak and Tom Martin's 60-meter dash, it's slower than when they were in their track days, of course. But, it fares up somewhat decently. And we're talking just 2 years ago. So that earns the title of the fastest powerlifter on the planet now. I think he would beat every other powerlifter in a 40-yard dash straight up. So, with all that broken down, I know some people are going to say, what about Russell? What about Russell? Well, what about Russell? At least I would need to see Russ sprint on video because we've never seen it. You just can't assume someone's fast just based off of even an athletic background. I've no doubt he was probably a very good football player, looking the part, but we got to see it. So Russ, if you're watching this, let's see you sprint, dog. Let's see the Jets. But in all seriousness, I would like to see him sprint. And yeah, like I said, you never know. When I was in college, there's a guy named Jamal Jones that everybody thought would be fast. And he ran like a 12.4 100-meter dash. And he was built. He was 5'11", like 190, triceps popping, tattoos on each tricep. Like, look the part. And slow. Now, with that being said, what I think would be really cool would be to have a bunch of well-known lifters just compete in a 60-meter dash at just a random track meet. Because you can sign up as an open athlete and just compete. So it'd be so cool to see, like me, Russ, Sean, Taylor Atwood, all these guys, and just see where we end up. I really have no idea. Okay, enough of the speculation. Let's get to a question that is practical, and hopefully this helps you out with your training. What motivates the decision to program a 5x3 instead of a 5x4, or 9x2 instead of a 6x3 with your 7-week cycles? Now, first of all, these are not rep equated, so that's very important. So 5x3, 15 total reps versus 20 total reps. Now on the 9x2 and 6x3, those are both 18 cumulative reps. Remember, on my video on how to coach yourself, I said the cutoff is about 7 reps or more, where you just count the set count. Whereas once you get under that, that's where you have to count the reps per set, because then all sets are not created equal. So that's where I switched to cumulative reps, and I would do the 5x4 on a peaking cycle, and I'd be more likely to do the 5x3 on an off-season cycle. Now this is because with myself, around 20 cumulative reps is at that moderate to higher volume, and 15 reps is at around that coasting point. So when I'm in the off season, actually, I don't do 5x3 specifically, but I usually do 4x4. And then in the peaking, then I do a 5x4 in a similar context. So you want to increase the magnitude as you go into a peak on the competition lift specifically. Now you can make up the missed volume if you really want to focus on hypertrophy in the off season. You can still make up for that in other accessories, but you don't want to have that strong specialization and that high magnitude and just really blast it, because then, like I've said before, you really have nowhere to go. Now the 9x2 versus 6x3 is actually where the answer is probably the opposite that you would expect. I'm more likely to do the 6x3 in a competition peak. In fact, I've actually only done the 9x2s in off seasons. Now the reason for this is training time and how that affects the deadlift. So something I didn't mention in the How to Coach Yourself video, I actually had to edit it out for the sake of time, was hypertrophy per minute. And that's very important, because you want to focus also on the fact that higher reps is more efficient. So you could do 3 sets of 10, and that is equal to 7 sets of 3 in a Brad Schoenfeld study in terms of hypertrophy. You could do 3 sets of 10 in a much shorter time, to where then you could do 3 sets of 12 on leg extensions in the same amount of time. So actually, indirectly, it is flat out superior for hypertrophy when you take that context in mind. Now, the reason why I do the 9x2 in the off season is because in the off season I don't have to deadlift the same way. I don't have to peak my deadlift all the time. So a lot of times I'll either do stiff leg deadlifts or just not deadlift at all on that day and deadlift 1 time a week when deep in the off season. Whereas when I'm in the in season, I'll do 6 sets of 3. I'll do a single with, let's say, 95%, 6 sets of 3. Then I'll do 3 sets of 5 on sumo deadlift, 2 sets of 5 on snatch grip deadlifts, and 3 sets of 11 on feet up bench, because I bench 6 days a week. You can't do 9 sets of squats on that day, or actually 10 sets if you count the single, by swapping out 9x2 there instead. So that really becomes the limitation. And no matter what, I think time always becomes a limitation when it comes to powerlifting. That always becomes an important variable, because if someone quits before they reach their prime, well, then that means they burnt out. So that has to do with their interest level, and maybe they spent too much time in the gym. If you never quit, well, now you're going to reach your peak, your actual genetic ceiling, and that is going to really take a ridiculous amount of time in the gym once you are deadlifting 675, or once you are squatting 585 every single time you do a single, which is very possible down the road for a lot of people. Maybe you don't think it's possible now, but as you continue to get stronger, your time in the gym just to hit a single at RPE 7 and then just to do 3 sets of 5 becomes the same amount of time it used to take to do 6 sets of 5 if you wanted to. So it really drastically shifts things. And that's why ultimately doing really high sets with low reps ends up becoming very, very situational. So that's it, guys. Make sure to like the video, support the channel, subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.
The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, who comes short again and again.